So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another scenario replay, although this one is going to be on 0.96 rather than 0.97, and this one was sent to me by Arsal, and I think he also made this scenario, I might be wrong, but this one is called The Defense of EREGION, and we have a relatively small elven hamlet here in the middle, but the small size of this elven settlement will actually help the elven defenders when all is said and done, because obviously a larger settlement is going to be very difficult for the one army to defend. And there are some rules, but well, there is one rule basically, and it's a very simple one. The elven army which is within the settlement must lose 75% of their numbers before the two other elven armies in the top and bottom corners there on the minimap are allowed to come and help them. Now, I'm not quite sure how they're going to gauge that, because of course the little percentage bar down here takes into account the entirety of your team's numbers remaining. And if that ticks down to 75% before they start moving, that indicates that this army within the settlement has lost far more than 75% of their numbers. So I hope Eclipse 2500 is keeping close tabs on his numbers, because he is going to need some help, because all four of these Angmar armies, which are up here on the hill, barreling towards the settlement, are going to come and get him. It is worth saying, however, that having a cursory glance over these armies, which we'll go through the compositions in a little bit more detail in just a moment, none of them are very high tier. Like, all of them have got some decent units, like this army over here I think has got some Blackguard, well, one unit of which are on Blackguard, and then a couple units of Scourge Raiders as well, but the rest of it is low tier Fellas and Marauders, and that's kind of the same story with all of the Angmar armies, except for this one at the top I think, which is a little bit more elite. But all things considered, Imladris are not hugely outgunned here, and based on the fact that they do have that settlement that they can use to defend, as well as more cavalry, when you combine all three of their armies, there is the potential here that they could very easily win this, I think. However, I think we will go through the attacking armies first of all, because obviously things are very easy for them, as with a lot of these scenarios when you've got a lot of the orcs on the attack. Their job is basically just to swarm forward and try and crush any resistance in their path. Angmar are also, overall, arguably the strongest of the orc factions when it comes to just sheer brute force. Mordor and Isengard, you know, Isengard have got a more balanced army perhaps. Mordor have got arguably the slightly stronger elites as well. But Angmar, when it comes to facing Imladris, a combination of the numbers as well as the elites that Angmar have to offer can often yield the desired results for the orcs, but we'll see. I mean, this is certainly not the just for full elite Angmar armies. There are a lot of lower tier units, for example the Goblin Band, which naturally are not going to get a huge amount done against the higher tier of Imladris troops. Even the lowest tier, like the Eldar Makar, will be able to carve their way through Goblin Band without too much of an issue, so they will just be here to basically die for the cause, fodder on the front. And there's more Goblin Band, so 3 units of Goblin Band, so you know, you kind of get the idea of where these armies are going already. Certainly very numbers focused, and they're going to have to go into the choke points of the settlement as well. However, every Angmar army does have at least one elite unit for their general's bodyguard, and in this case it's going to be the Witcher-Armed Blackguard for the Steward of Dale, which I should say is the first of the attacking armies. And the Witcher-Armed Blackguard, of course, as we've seen before, as far as the orc factions go, they are probably the strongest sword and shield unit that is available to them. Obviously, you know, Angmar also have the Witcher-Armed Hammerguard as the other infantry unit that's multiple HP, but the Blackguard certainly are stronger than the Goblin King Bodyguard and the Minas Morgul Chosen. Or the Minas Morgul Bodyguard, I should say. There are also several units here of the Orc Fellas, which, against Imladris, the AP isn't actually that bad. However, the low skill of the Orc Fellas is really going to be brought into question here, you know, because obviously the elves going to be able to utilise their higher skill to very, very good effect. But the Orc Fellas, they are here in enough numbers where they could do a decent amount of damage, but of course they are also quite vulnerable to ranged fire, and the Steward of Dale is also the closest to the settlement, so these fellas could be the first ones in. We also have the Scourge Raiders, which is it's a similar story here. They actually do have the armour upgrade as well, so we've got the jet black armour. They are actually good in melee. They can dish out a fair amount of damage. They're not AP, but they do have decent base damage numbers, being a dual-wielding axe unit. The problem they do have, of course, is the lack of a shield. Even with the armour upgrade, means that they are a prime target for arrows to try and shoot. Obviously in 0.97, as we saw very recently, they have been given a ranged projectile as well, but for 0.96, they are very much a pure melee unit. And back here we have more fellas. Even more fellas, and then I believe at the back here we have 3 units of the Angmar Marauders, which we don't actually see an awful lot of, because when Angmar get to pick their own armies, they tend to go more quality focused with their Guardians of Kharn for very good reason, because they're a very solid unit. But the Angmar Marauders here will of course be here for their numbers. In terms of overall effectiveness, the elves are going to be able to relatively easily deal with individual units of Marauders. It's going to be the numbers that sets them apart a little bit. Agalar Gal Udithon I'm sure that I'll screw his name up several times during this. He also has a unit of Witch Realm Blackguard for his General's Bodyguard, so again, another elite. He also has some pretty significant units over here as well, in the shape of a couple of units of Barrow Wights, which of course in 0.96.1. Very, very strong overall. Over a long engagement, they can be absolutely invaluable for Angmar. They're very, very powerful. Obviously, they're being made a lot less durable in 0.97, whilst also being given the same speed as normal infantry. I'll be interested to see how they affect this battle, because obviously the Barrow Wights can be used as a very, very effective anchor for Angmar to just sustain their attack for a long period of time. And he actually has a couple of units of them, so yeah. There's also a couple of units of the Gundabad Guard, which they are slightly higher tier spears than sort of the Goblin Band, obviously. On a same sort of level as the Guardians of Khan Doom, but obviously with all of the downsides that being a spearman entails in 0.96.1, which is of course, less killing power against infantry. Now there are cavalry on the field, which the Gundabad Guard could be used to try and zone out, but even so, a charge from something like the Gwaithir Rockdor is going to be very, very nasty indeed. This is a unit which of course could be extremely useful for smoking out the elves in the settlement, which is the Witches, but the Witches are also going to be the main target for any archers. If they're seen on the approach, they will get shot up. So I'm sure if any of you watched the recent podcast that Scouts of Entertainment did where we talked about the Witches, I said that I've seen them fail more often than I've seen them succeed, so we'll see if that holds true in this battle as well for Angmar. More of an elite army actually over here, I suppose. So two of the Angmar armies have got a little bit more quality about them, because they've also got some upgraded Guardians of Khan Doom, as well as a couple of units of Witch Realm Pikemen as well. Then, over here, the third Angmar army, which is going to be who we're seeing this replay from the perspective of today, which is Inarius. And he has got several units of Angmar Halberds, which again, the AP could be useful. But in Bladris, with the compositions particularly that I've seen, they're not going to be wanting for any phalanx units, so the Halberds may struggle from that perspective. But again, more numbers for the Orcs is always going to be a good thing for them. His General's Bodyguard is also not on foot. He has got some cavalry, so he has got the Witch Realm Inquisitors, which could prove to be very, very necessary for Angmar to win this fight, because the reinforcing armies do have knights, and the Witch Realm Inquisitors will need to try and go toe-to-toe with them, otherwise they could end up rear-charging a lot of these lower tier Angmar units in particular and send a lot of the Orcs running for the hills. So more Angmar Marauders, of course, more Marauders, some Goblin Trackers as well, so some ranged units that they at least are able to bring to the field, and a unit of Witch Realm Hammer Guard and some Trolls. So a few elite units here in Inarius' army, but overall nothing too otherworldly. And then finally we have Captain Gervais, who has got a combination of Gundabad Guard and Guardians of Khan Doom. When I was having a cursory glance over these armies, this one looked to be the most elite from afar. So he's got some Guardians of Khan Doom as well, upgraded Witch Realm Pikemen. He's also got some Inquisitors, which will be very useful. He's also got some Trolls of Gundabad, and then back here, more Gundabad Guard and more Hammer Guard. So overall, not the most ridiculous Angmar stacks we've ever seen, but they do have some quality interlaced throughout, so it's going to be difficult, I think, for the Elves in the settlement to get a lot of damage done early. We shall see. Because Eclipse 2500, he has to lose the vast bulk of his army before he's allowed to get reinforcements. We'll see if the Elves can defend their homeland here. We do have some Noritano warriors, which archers are going to be key here, because from the looks of things, there aren't too many archers on the part of Angmar, although of course some of them can hide. So there is that, but you would still imagine that Imladris will easily be able to hold the ranged advantage here. They will need it if they're going to do a lot of damage early. There is a unit of knights within the settlement as well, the Gwaithir Rockdor. They could go after, actually, Steward of Dale's army right from the get-go, because he doesn't have any ranged units, it seems, and he doesn't have any Inquisitors to back him up either. Micro is going to be important, though, of course, because it's very easy for one of the armies that does have Inquisitors to just cycle them over and try and catch the Rockdor, but we'll see. Then, of course, the Imladris Sentry is probably the most important part of the initial defence here from Eclipse 2500. They need to hold their phalanx in position, otherwise the settlement is going to be overrun pretty quickly. We also have more archers, the Elder Enway Haru Quinga, obviously very, very good missile damage on these guys, and good in melee as well, which they will need to engage in melee, because the Orcs are very much in the ascendancy here with all their numbers. Upgraded Imladris Guardians again. The Guardians of Khan Doom, as I've said before, are a very good line infantry unit, but they're certainly not the equal of the Imladris Guardians when they've got the armour upgrades. This is arguably the strongest line infantry unit in the game that you can actually have a decent number of. I think you can have 2 before the cost increases, which, General's Bodyguard units like the Witch Realm Blackguard are obviously stronger than the Imladris Guardians, but you can't really use them as a front line. The Imladris Guardians you very much can, should you so choose. A couple of units of Elder Enway Haru Makeel, which again, very, very powerful. They're going to be able to carve their way through the vast majority of Angmar forces 1-to-1, but it won't be 1-to-1. We've also got some Gwaith the Arthand. We've seen how durable they can be in the past. They will need to be once again. And then a couple more units of the upgraded Guardians. So an elite force here, but a relatively small one. I mean, we'll see how he's able to defend this settlement. There are several ways in, for example. We'll see how quick Angmar are, because the Angmar armies are relatively spread out, so it's not like they're all going to be crashing down on the settlement all at once. So we'll see. This Imladris reinforcing army over in the corner is going to be Arsal's, so he is the one who sent me the replay, even though we're not watching it from his perspective. Very much big thank you to him. A couple of units in Orcish warriors once again. We have the Gwaith the Rockdoor, very key unit in this battle, I would assume. A couple of units from Imladris Guardians, 3 units in fact, again upgraded. Upgraded Eldar Makar as well, a couple of units of Eldar Enway Heru Hatal, and another unit of upgraded Eldar Makar. So not a huge reinforcing army, but some very key units, in particular the Knights, and I imagine it's going to be very similar on the other side. Neo at Danulko, I should say. He's got some Gwaith the Rockdoor as well. Looks like a slightly larger army over on this side, in fact, with several units of Noriterno warriors, including some Imladris Blade Masters. See, again, very good at heavy elven swords. And then several units of Eldar Makar with the armour upgrades as well, so a bit more in terms of numbers on this side. We'll see how well that suits them. So again, only 15k frames, a shorter scenario, which is to be expected with not quite so many, well, from an Orc perspective, there's a lot more lower tier units, and also things are going to get going pretty quickly, I think, because they're right next to the settlement. So without further ado, let's begin. So I would, as always, when there is a numbers advantage in terms of the armies, I would always give the advantage to the attackers in this situation. I mean, Angmar in particular as well, this is pretty much what they are designed for, to attack with reckless abandon and crush resistance. Now, Imladris are better positioned than most other factions to withstand that, particularly when they're allowed to bring a lot of their elites, such as the Sentries and the Heru Makil, in a lot of numbers, as they have done here. We shall see. We can see the Gwaith the Rockdoor are going to be heading out, so they're going to be sallying forth. They need to be very careful, though. Now, it is worth saying that I think the Inquisitors... Yeah, there they are. You can see the Inquisitors are already moving across, because while the other armies are not allowed to move, the only thing they really need to be on the lookout for are the Gwaith the Rockdoor. Now, I certainly wouldn't go right here into the guts of Agalar's army and Inarius' army, because the Inquisitors are right there. But also, the Witchers could decide to just turn their fire on this unit of Knights, and a good shot on them would be enough to kill them off completely. As you can see here, looks like the Steward of Dale is going to cycle around to this side and attack the settlement from a different angle, which again, understandable. But this does leave him a little bit open, because when Eclipse 2500's armies are in a position where they can signal for the reinforcements, this will of course leave him open to Arsal attacking him from behind. You can see here the Goblin Band are here. Honestly, in 0.96.1, the Gwaith the Rockdoor could probably charge into the Goblin Band like this without too much in terms of consequences. They may be spears, but they are very, very low tier spears. So the Elven Knights in particular are not really going to be too concerned about any pokes and prods they receive from the Goblins. But also, in 0.96.1, the spears they will do damage to cavalry, but it does take a little bit of time before that damage starts to rack up. But you can see here the Inquisitors are already moving over, so I'd be interested to see actually how Eclipse uses this cavalry, because I think the window where he could have been able to get some cheeky charges off on the Steward of Dale's army's already passed. Maybe a little bit of indecision there has allowed the Inquisitors to basically just stand guard, and they're just going to be following the Gwaith the Rockdoor all the way around the settlement now. They're not going to be able to get any sort of charges off for free. If they do try and avoid them and charge into the infantry, the Inquisitors will be able to respond very, very quickly. So I think, honestly, he'd probably be best off just saving his cavalry for the late game now, waiting until the reinforcements come, because then you've got 3 units of Knights coming in from the left field. And that could be particularly devastating. Rear charges, because 3 units of Knights would easily be able to overrun a single unit of which are Inquisitors. The Gwaith the Rockdoor, of course, with that Elven skill. Still, the settlement is not under any sort of attack. You can see over here as well that up here, Captain Gervais's Angmar army is also marching into position. He's going to be laying siege to the settlement from this side, which again potentially leaves him open to a rear attack from Neo-Danulka. But I don't think that's going to concern the forces of Angmar too much, because there is, after all, a town centre that we can see here in the middle. So they could just make a play for the town centre and just try and overrun this army very, very quickly. But I'm actually interested to see how slowly they seem to be moving in. They're being very more careful and considered than I was thinking they would be, particularly with the frames being as relatively low as they are. Here come the Gwythi Rockdor as we ride along with them. This would be a very bold charge indeed, because the Witch Realm Inquisitors are right there. This would be a kamikaze charge if they did go in here right now. Surely they're not going to charge the Witch Realm Inquisitors head on. That's not an engagement you want to take. It's not efficient at all from the perspective of the Rockdor. And now they do come back. I'm not sure what that was all about. Maybe he's just trying to sort of coax the Orcs into attacking a little bit more quickly. The Goblin Band are also in support of the Witch Realm Inquisitors, so yeah. Certainly no easy pickings when it comes to the charges. Inquisitors are going to try and chase them down. They're both fresh though. Yeah, they're just going to run off. So, closer to the settlement. Sort of getting the threat of the initial engagements now, and I would hope that he has reorganised some of his forces at the very least. So he is going to try and... I'm not sure whether you can actually go through here. Again, settlements like this can be a little bit weird with the roads and paths you can take. Like, there's a lot of gaps here between the houses, but I would imagine that there are sort of set roads you can actually go down. So I'd imagine that these two roads, well, these three roads are the only ones in and out. I don't think you can use that one. What have we got going on over here? Still a game of cat and mouse between the Elven Knights. They definitely want to steer clear of this now, because both units of Witch Realm Inquisitors are here. They certainly don't want to get too close now, otherwise they could end up getting pincered between the two. They could try and charge into the Goblin Band. The Orc Fellas are at the front as well. The Inquisitors still moving around. And you can see the Goblin Band are immediately trying to move over to cover the Orc Fellas. Not sure what the Elven Cavalry is going to do here. I mean, I can only imagine this melee engagement is going to be very fast and very brutal. Is this where the Elven Knights make their play? I don't think it is, because the Witch Realm Inquisitors, these players were not born yesterday and know exactly what they're doing. Those Witch Realm Inquisitors waiting. The Gwythi Rockdor do need to be careful, because with two units of Inquisitors on their tail, if they slip up for just a moment, and now also they're only warmed up, whereas the Inquisitors are fresh, so... Ooh, they're going to get caught. Yep. Took his eye off the ball there, Eclipse 2500. That was poor. Very poor. Meanwhile, you also see over here the Witch Realm Inquisitors are... I thought they were going to charge into that infantry then, but they're not. They're instead going to try and, I think... Well, they were going to try and sort of surround the Gwythi Rockdor. He needs to keep force pathing them out there. But yeah, got a little bit sloppy and careless there. You can actually see one Inquisitor fell, but a fair few more of the Elven Knights fell as well. What on earth was that? Surely they're not using their arrows in such a hideously... No, they are. Again, that's unfortunate. Like, there's really no point in trying to shoot the Witch Realm Inquisitors with archers like this. Their shields, their armour, it's just too strong. It's a real waste of ammunition, to be quite frank. You'd be much better off trying to thin out the infantry numbers, because you're actually going to get kills on infantry. And also, this is so hideously inaccurate as well. You're shooting over these buildings. Most of these arrows are missing. You've got to do better than that. That's very poor. Gwythi Rockdor. Still just, again, they're still just cycling around. They need to be careful of the trolls as well. I still feel as though Eclipse, he needs to get these guys off to the side of the map and just wait, so that he can send them in later on, because they're not doing anything worthwhile at this point. They're just being hunted down. But I think the start of the infantry engagement is going to begin very, very shortly. The Steward of Dale is sending forward a huge amount of Orc Fellas. The Gwythi Arthand are going to form up the first line, with Elrond amongst their number. And the support is going to be from the Imladris Guardians as well, so obviously these Elven units will very, very easily hold back the Orc Fellas for now, but that's a lot of Orcs as the Elven Spears settle into their formation for the long haul here. And over here, very similar story, although it's Pikes over here, and Orc Fellas, of course, not exactly the best when it comes to trying to force their way through lines with their mass in comparison to some of their brethren. So yeah, these Imladris sentries easily going to be able to hold the line against these light Orc Axemen. What have we got going on over here? Yeah, we can see, yeah, these knights have been, frankly, wasted completely. Like, parking them right behind this army, there was only going to be one ending to that. They need to get out of there. Like, I've said it several times at this point, they need to just get the hell away from these engagements, because they're just being made a mockery of. Meanwhile, another engagement over on this side, the Witch Realm Inquisitors moving in. So now we can see Captain Gervais is moving in with a more elite force as well. Guardians of Khan Doom upgraded, but the Imladris Guardians are the stronger unit. There's also these arrows now flying all over the place. Oof, that is a huge amount of orcs over on this side. The Scourge Raiders are at the back. There's also some Gundabad Guard moving forward. But that's a lot of Elven arrows ripping right through the formation. There's no body piercing, it's worth saying, from the Elves of Imladris, but the archer damage will still be very, very much appreciated. So you can see here that the orcs can't actually go through here. This is impassable terrain. So they are going to try and go right around with the Guardians of Khan Doom, put pressure on every attacking position they can, which is definitely the right thing to do as the attackers. It seems like there's 4 roads into the settlement that they can actually use, and putting pressure on all of them with your superior numbers is absolutely the right thing to do. Meanwhile, the combination of Imladris Guardians and Sentries still holding back the Orcs from the Steward of Dale at the front. The Orc Fellas and the Angmar Marauders, obviously not the finest in terms of quality, but there's a lot of them. The Barrow Wights are also hobbling their way into position, which will be a difficult foe for the Elves to actually defeat here. But you can also see the Guardians of Khan Doom and the Eldervenway Harry McKeel are holding back this force for now. You can also see there's Witch Realm Pikemen amongst their number as well, trying to force their way to the front, get their phalanx down. Those pikes are going up and down with worrying frequency. They're all trying to force their way to the front. Haru Quinga are trying to fire. I mean, over here is the biggest concentration of orcs so far, and you can see what Steward of Dale is trying to do. He's trying to push through with his mass from the Gundabad Guard, but I don't think they're going to make it. In particular, with another unit of pikes back here, I think all they're going to succeed in doing is getting themselves killed. The Scourge Raiders are back there, but there's a lot more reinforcements where they came from, so the orcs can afford to be a little bit more reckless. The Imladris Guardians are over here as well. There's more arrows flying all over the place, which are difficult to keep track of. They're actually firing over this tree. Haru Quinga is still trying to fire as well, so the pressure is very much on for the Elves. The Hammer Guard are also coming in, so good to see the orcs are being so aggressive, because after all, if they can take the settlement, then it'll be a race against time for the Elves to try and retake it when the reinforcements come along. So they're not leaving much in reserve here, which I like. The Trolls are also moving in, and there's only a single unit of Imladris Guardians back here, and with all of this orc support with the Trolls, this one unit is not going to be able to hold back this assault. There's also the Witch Realm Inquisitors that are hovering in the background as well, which the soft underbelly of the Imladris army is located back here. The Noraturno warriors, you can see, I think the fire arrows are probably a good move here, actually. Already talked to Tyre, but this assault has certainly sort of been stopped in its tracks, really, to be fair. Like, these Gundabad Guard tried to push through, but they ran out of steam. Particularly with the back of those Imladris sentries, it has been stopped. But it's back here, I think, where the main threat lies now. Over here, the Elves may very well end up losing, but then their front line is in no immediate danger of falling apart. Over here, meanwhile, with the Barrow Wights slowly pushing through as well, that could be a bit of a problem. Steward of Dale, once again, is trying to push through with sheer numbers, but this is just basic infantry, so they're probably just going to get sliced up on the way through. Which is good news for Imladris overall, trying to kill off those numbers. What's going on out here with the what's left of the Knights? Yeah, they're just being hunted down again. Witch Realm Inquisitors gunning for them very much. Meanwhile here, the rear of the settlement is where I said most likely for the orcs to break through, and they are doing so. This unit of Imladris Guardians is already on its last legs. The Trolls, the vanguard of that assault, and then a whole bunch of heavy spears and infantry coming forward, and now the Noraturno warriors being attacked. The Noraturno warriors are not actually that bad in melee. The main draw for picking them over the Eldar Quinga is the fact that they are slightly stronger in melee. But against Trolls, that's going to be tough. The Haru McKeel would kill the Trolls in a vacuum, but the Trolls are very well supported, I must say. And there's still a lot of Orc reserves as well. These Angmar Marauders, I mean, this frontal assault, the Barrow Wights are not actually able to push their way to the front because there's so many Angmar Marauders and Goblin Band and Orc Fellas in front of them. So Imladris will still be able to hold on from the front over here. And over on this side as well, the Orcs are really struggling. The Gwaith Arthan, the sort of the bulwark of this defence, and then all of the strong Imladris units around them as well. Also fighting hard. There's not really much in reserve anymore. The Eldar Quinga are here, potentially thinking about being committed to melee. There's more arrows flying in as well. The Haru McKeel, of course, such a strong heavy swordsman. As far as the Elven heavy swordsmen go, outside of General's bodyguard units like the Noldorin and Blade Masters, the Haru McKeel are the strongest. Meanwhile, Yeah, as you can see over here that the Goblin Trackers are firing into the Salmon as well. Firing right into the backs of those Elder, which again is absolutely ideal. Goblin Trackers, very cheap arch unit, really making the most of what they're all about. The Imladris Guardians are moving over here now, and I think this is more of a response to a big mass push on the way, which yeah it is. You can see the Gundabad Guard are now trying to force their way through. The Barrow Whites, the upgraded Guardians of Khan Doom are moving forwards as well. So that unit of Imladris Guardians probably on the way over here to try and curtail that a little bit. But I'm not sure. I feel as though the Elves... Let's have a look over here. I mean, the percentage of kills, they need to... The Elven reinforcement armies need to be ready to sprint into position here, because otherwise the Orcs are just going to be able to take the town centre, and that will be that. The Witchround Blackguard are on the front line over here now, which means the Pikes are going to have to do most of the work here, because the Gwaith-i-Arthand, while they are very, very resilient, they don't necessarily get their killing done quickly, especially against elite units like the Blackguard. Heru Makeel now, there's just too many of them for them to kill off. I mean, they're actually getting some archer support now. There's Elder Heru Quinga firing right into the side of this formation, but once again the Gundabad Guard getting right up in the faces of the Elves. Now all of the Pikes are also marching in a thick column. Heru Quinga. Here this front line is starting to buckle as well. The town centre is compromised. Excuse me. Yeah, you can see here that the numbers are just too much. This is where the Orcs will start to snowball this this victory that they are earning now here in the town. Well, here in the town. Several units of Heru Quinga, which will give as good as they get in melee, but really their arrows are needed to help stabilise some of the other front lines. Meanwhile, over here you can see that most of the Imladris Guardians at this point have fallen, and it's mostly just the Heru Makeel who are trying to hold back this Angmar force. Guardians of Khan Doom trickling into the town centre. The Elder Heru Quinga in melee now, so the mass push has gone a certain distance. Yeah, there goes the general, the Witch King there in full view, and that is just out there. So yeah, unfortunately, Eclipse 2500's Knights really didn't do anything of note. Meanwhile, this huge blob of Orcs still getting shot. All of those spears, however, are down. Heru Makeel are being peeled off. The Imladris sentries trying to go there. Ooh, hello. That is a crispy section of the front line. So yeah, the Witchers must have shot, and they are getting out of there. Not a huge amount of damage though. I mean, the Witchers can be far more devastating than that. It looks as though they actually used 2 of their shots, which is a lot for Witchers. Here come the Pikes. So that is half of Eclipse 2500's forces, which honestly, that would be the point. I think the Elven reinforcements should be allowed to come forward, because it's very clear that there's going to be nothing left of this Imladris army by the time the reinforcements actually arrive at this point. Oof. Heru Quinga taking some damage there from the Goblin Trackers, but their armour making them stand firm. They barely even flinched. Some Witchround Blackguard back there, more Angmar Marauders. And still defeat seems certain. I mean, this is the problem that Angmar are running into, the fact that really none of the Imladris forces in melee are easy pickings, which means even if they do push through, the units that they're having to face, very, very powerful. Now you can see this unit of Heru Quinga being siphoned off to try and block this advance as well. The Guardians of Khan Doom and the Angmar Halberds coming in, they're going to be met by the Heru Quinga, and now you can see that maybe that was the case, because marching forwards now, Arsal's army and Neo Donulko's army. We'll see if they make it in time. Meanwhile, these sentries still holding firm. The Noratino warriors still doing the same. Those Imladris sentries have really been the MVPs for Imladris so far, I think, because wherever they've been, the line has held rock solid. Everywhere else it's been a little bit, touch and go, especially back here. I think this is where the Orcs have had the most joy, simply because this was the least defended road and they came forward with trolls and heavy infantry. And a single unit of Heru Makeel is not going to be sufficient to win that, so I think they're actually going to try and form up a more compact defensive position. We'll see how successful that is, because over here you can see that the numbers are now becoming too much. The Gwaith-i-Arthand being overwhelmed by the Witchround Blackguard and the huge amount of reinforcements they have with them. Elder Heru Quinga. They still have ammunition judging on by the fact they've got their bows out, but they are needed in melee. They need to pull out their swords and get stuck in, and you can see, yeah, they are. So Eclipse 2500, this is actually a decision I do agree with. Try and sort of make the engagement as narrow as possible, just so you can try and hold out for as long as possible, because the reinforcing armies are going to need that. They're going to need to know that there is something left in the settlement that's holding the line, even if like they're really struggling. Still the Norotino warriors fighting. Now you can start to see that defeat is starting to look certain for the Imladris forces that are left. There's Hammer Guard over here as well, obviously a very potent force. I think Captain Gervais has left behind some forces which he's using as a rearguard action, including 2 units of Inquisitors, which is going to be a problem, I think, for Neo Danulko, because it's going to effectively stop him from charging forward. And I do feel as though, based on how this match ends, I feel as though I do have some criticisms of some of the compositions that were chosen for this fight, provided it was meant to be sort of a very balanced affair. But over here, a little bit more joy for the elves as the Gwythi Rockdoor come forward, and they are going to charge directly in to the Goblin Band. They are exhausted. Not the best of charges, to be fair. They never got up to charge speed. I feel as though this wasn't the unit they were actually aiming for, and they just sort of wandered into melee with them. But the infantry needs to charge here. They need to hurry, because Eclipse 2500's army is on its last legs. And you can see here, especially with units like the Witchround Blackguard leading the way, it's going to be difficult for Imladris. Norotino warriors trying to shoot in. He's barely holding on at this point. Let's go and see what's happening out here. Big engagement, actually. So actually Captain Gervais has decided to take the aggressive path, seeing that Neo Danulko's army was actually a little bit more spread out. And he needs to get in here now. He's spread his army out far too thin, because this quick aggressive push from Captain Gervais has done exactly what he wanted it to. These Eldar Makar were not prepared. Trolls, Witchrealm Inquisitors, all of these heavy spears and halberds, as well as the Hammer Guard coming in. Support from the Goblin Trackers as well. Yeah, this not prepared at all. And now he's having to go into melee with the Witchrealm Inquisitors. And unfortunately with the nearby support of the halberds as well. I mean, the Norotino warriors are doing their best to try and shoot in, but this reinforcement army is being eaten alive out here. I mean, the Imladris Blade Masters are over here, but it's been a bloodbath so far. Meanwhile, Arsal's forces are now moving in, which is good to see. The upgraded Imladris Guardians, they are starting to sandwich some of these Angmar forces. And that is the force out here. Already half of Neo Danulko's army has been completely swallowed up by a combination of Inarius and Captain Gervais, and I feel as though they deserve a lot of credit for that, just coming out and swamping over him immediately. Now, admittedly, Neo Danulko's army wasn't actually that strong when you look at it. It was not a full stack, and a lot of it was just Eldar Makar. But even so, I feel as though he had his army far too spread out, especially with all that cavalry and all those trolls. Sending forward the Eldar Makar all on their own was only going to end one way. Yeah, and you can see here that already broken and fighting to the death. A real tragedy out here on the open field for Imladris. They still have their knights, but I feel as though this battle is already won for Angmar with that move. Very decisive action taken. The Eldar Makar are back here in the backfield trying to get through with Arsal, so they're going to have to try, I think, and retake the town centre, because the Orcs now have it. There's very little of Eclipse 2500's army left. Fighting on all sides here. There are the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm. Just a carpet of dead Orcs primarily, so it does go to show how many Eclipse 2500 was able to kill. But unfortunately you can see here the Blackguard, the Barrow Wights, Imladris are not able to carve their way through this quickly enough. Defeat seems certain. Yeah, I mean, it's really just the Alderaan Haru-Gwynga that are fighting in the town centre now. I mean, at the very least they can't break, because they're within their own town centre. Only half of Inarius' force remains. The Eldar Makar continue to push forward, but there's a lot of pikes. What is going on out here? Yeah, these Norotino warriors have just been hunted by the Witchrealm Inquisitors. The Trolls are also here. The Trolls have barely been touched. Goblin Trackers, Witchrealm Pikemen. The Witchrealm Inquisitors are still just hunting down the Gwythi Rockdoor. Here come the Goblin Trackers, pulling out their natty weaponry and melee. They're just going to overwhelm the Norotino warriors as the Witchrealm Inquisitors, which I would say honestly have been the MVPs for Angmar. They may not have been the ones that were doing most of the work in the settlement, but I feel as though the support that they've offered has just allowed Angmar to do what they do best. And I will have a criticism actually of the Angmar armies after this. Usually I'm not sort of the one that goes to say that the Orcs had too much of an advantage, but in this scenario I would say they certainly have. I feel as though this certainly does feel like someone's first sort of attempt at creating a scenario in terms of the balancing of it. Meanwhile over here, yeah, you can see the Barrow Wights. The Imladris Guardians are fighting hard on the front line, not necessarily losing. They're not really making any progress either. And over here it's primarily Eldar Makar, which at this point are just being overwhelmed. You can see the pikes are here, the heavy spears, there's no way that they're going to be able to make too many inroads. And that's pretty much it. I mean, yeah. Eclipse 2500 is pretty much completely gone. I think he's still got a couple of units. Or has he? Perhaps not. Noricino Warriors wavering. Unsurprising considering the trolls. And then the Imladris Guardians. Still just fighting on. There's still Imladris Knights cycling the settlement. There's actually an engagement happening on the outside of things as Arsal was trying to sort of cycle around to help out over here. The Imladris Knights are still over here. They're going to charge into the Angmar Marauders, skewering a few of them. A good chunk of them, in fact. But unfortunately, I really don't think there's much progress to be made from Imladris out here either. And I think that this battle is going to end as a result of the town centre being captured, which is not something we actually see an awful lot of. But considering the rules of the scenario, it was absolutely the right tactic for the Orcs to go for, I think. And you can see over here that the Eldar Makar, salt being poured into the wounds as the Goblin trackers are shooting them at point blank. The Gundabad Guard are also surrounding them, although they're also getting a good amount of friendly fire, the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. And that is going to be that. Victory for the Orcs. The little town of EREGION has been captured by Angmar, which I'm sure will result in several thumbs down for this video, particularly seeing as how ultimately one-sided it was. And I feel as though that there are some criticisms I would make of the Angmar armies here. Like, some of the units did not need to be there. Like, I feel as though Angmar should not have had their Witch Realm Inquisitors here, because it just allowed... It made the Elven cavalry useless, basically, because all the Inquisitors needed to do was just sort of block the charges of the Gwythy Rockdor, hunt them down, in conjunction with the Trolls as well. It was too much, in my opinion. Far too much. Even if this was meant to be a little bit more in favour of Angmar, it was too much. You know, the Inquisitors were not needed. I would also say that the Elven reinforcement armies should have been, one, more substantial, because neither of them was a full stack, and two, they should have had access to more cavalry. I feel as though both of them should have had the Knight unit and the Heru Myro, and perhaps a couple of units of Noricino cavalry as well, just to really put the pressure on Angmar's backlines, because then it would have made Angmar... They have to go after the town centre quickly, of course, but it would also, you know, it would put more pressure on their backlines, which was sorely needed. So yeah, I do feel as though this... Honestly, I like the map. I like the idea of the scenario as well. The fact that, you know, the ones in the settlement need to lose a certain amount before the reinforcements come. It's a tried and true method of sort of running a scenario. But I feel as though the compositions here, in spite of Imladris having access to a lot of their good stuff, you know, and look here, 164 kills on this army. I mean, this was obviously Neo Denolko. He was absolutely eaten alive by Captain Gervais and Inarius' army, which really, it says everything about how strong the Angmar armies really were. I was actually looking at it first of all and I thought, oh, a lot of Marauders, a lot of Orc fellas, this shouldn't be too bad, but in retrospect, you know, the Black Guard, you know, I think it was the Inquisitors more than anything. Like, it was too much. So yeah, I would say that I think this was Arsal who made this. You know, for making them in the future, you have to bear that sort of thing in mind. If you give the attackers, who have a huge numbers advantage, too many of their tools to just sort of shut down what the defenders have, it's always going to be a snowball battle like this. And it was, you know, a 30% differential is a lot, you know, too much in my opinion. And then over here you can see, so the Angmar armies, all of the armies were actually relatively small, considering. But yeah, I mean, my criticisms still stand. I think you see 333 kills on the Witch Realm Inquisitors, and a lot of that was on good units as well. I mean, Gwythy Rockdor were included in that. Over here, again, 219, definitely the MVPs for Angmar as a whole. And then the other two armies, which are a little bit more focused around their infantry. Obviously, Steward of Dale got by far the least kills, but then he had the most fodder-centric army. All he really needed to do was engage with Imladris and attract as much of their attention as possible. Over here, the Gundabad Guard doing very well, of course. The Barrow Wights also in 0.96 are another unit which I would say Angmar probably doesn't need a huge amount of, simply because they're able to just sort of fight on for too long. In 0.97 that will cease to be such a problem. You know, in 0.97 this scenario would be able to use the Barrow Wights, and it would not tilt the balance of power too far in one way. But yeah, I mean, I can see what the comments are going to be. The Orcs are OP, the Orcs are too strong. This entirely came down to the compositions that were selected. Imladris are, in my opinion, stronger than Angmar for the most part. Angmar are a rush-centric faction with one thing that they can do. Imladris are, you know, very much in a position that they can counter a lot of what Angmar does. But here, for this scenario, Angmar were just given too many of their elites, in particular the ability to just shut down the Elven Knights without them being able to do really anything of note, which is what ultimately led to Angmar's relatively easy victory. But I do hope that we see more scenarios like this in the future, just a little bit more well tweaked and well balanced. Now, it is worth saying as well that I don't know whether this was from the scenario Discord, but if it was, I will post a link to that in the description below. Next up, I have actually been doing, well, the last few battles have actually been under an hour, so the next time we will be returning to a slightly longer one. I think we will be doing a battle on Edoras. So, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.